My name is Carlos Hernandez Ruiz. I have two surnames. I'm Mexican. And I am a psychotherapist. I trained in the US. I trained in holotropic breathwork. And I spent many years in the Amazon forest training and learning from traditional healers there. I come with a great passion around this topic, transgenerational trauma. When I had to write my thesis for my master's degree, I chose the treatment of trauma from a transpersonal perspective. And the part of transgenerational trauma impacted me very deeply, because even though I couldn't track my own personal experience related to it, I felt very close to that concept. And it actually blew my mind at that time, the concept of people suffering through things that they didn't have direct contact with. But I will explain a little bit more as we go forward. Today's topic is transgenerational trauma. The transgenerational trauma is a trauma that is passed down from generation to the next generation. Sometimes they didn't even have to interact. Do you mind putting the next one, please? So, transgenerational trauma is a field in psychology that developed after they start seeing that children who came from Europe, many of them, they were sent as babies, for example. When Nazi Germany when the war was happening in Europe, they sent many babies to the US, and they literally grew up in like American homes, very far away from the war, etc. Nevertheless, these kids were showing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Many of them were having dreams. Many of them were having like very vivid memories of the Holocaust. So they said, well, the child was sent to the US before there was an experience of these horrendous atrocities, but they are still having it in their DNA. So what happened? So they started doing that study, and they started seeing that trauma can be passed from generation through generation, and it happens in a way that is not necessarily by cohabitation. For example, it makes sense that if you are living with a traumatized parent, you will inherit some of those traits just by the way you are treated. But what happens when you didn't even grow up with those parents? How did that information pass? And this is where we go deep into the world of epigenetics, into quantum physics, spirituality, etc. I'll speak more about the children of the Holocaust a bit later. So let's start by saying, what is trauma? Trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, leaving lasting psychological, emotional, and physical effects. There is a disruption of the natural flow of life when we become traumatized. There are small t trauma, like we had a little accident in the car, somebody told us something hurtful, we had a breakup that, it doesn't change the path of our lives, But there are some big T trauma, which is losing somebody that we love deeply, losing something that we care deeply, or even acts of violence or loss or accidents, etc. These tragic events will impact in every single aspect of our lives. And I would say that trauma is inherently a spiritual illness. That's where it starts. Something happens in spirit, the shock or the experience we feel is like it disconnects us. For if anybody has ever experienced something difficult in their lives in that sense, the first thing we feel is, it's like if we are floating, outside of our body. It's a protection mechanism. We disconnect, first of all, from our higher self. Then from there, of course, we stop breathing, clench our teeth, tighten our body to be able to respond, fight or flight. Problem is, if we were animals, or if we lived in a more natural environment, like some of the tribes in nature, we would have ways to just shake it off and just keep moving with life. What happens is that sometimes we have to hold it, and then through the years of having this experience, and this happens in all levels: spiritual, energetic, emotional, psychological, well, psycho-emotional, relational, and physiological. It becomes actually physiological. So it is a multidimensional. It is a multidimensional situation, and it needs a multidimensional approach. Before I start explaining a little bit of each of the levels that I identify or that I think there are, of course, I can bet you there are many more, but these are the most important, at least for me, And I would like to say that going into this realm, it's a very sacred realm. It's a place where we go deeply into the spirit. As a therapist or as a healer, when we are working with these aspects, for example, of transgenerational trauma, we have to do it with utmost respect, not only for the person that we are working with, but also for the generations behind. But at the same time, in that sacredness is where healing can happen. So some of the implications or the symptoms, if we could call it, at the spiritual level is a loss of soul. There are parts of us that fragment, and those pieces is like, for our protection, we have to disconnect or dissociate from certain emotions that are just too much for us to survive. At the end of the day, we have an impulse to survive, and we, at an unconscious level, we think of greatest good. So in the moment, it's better to lose a limb than losing the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? So what we do is automatically we let go of certain parts of us that are too painful, and then those parts stay there. And in the moment of the emergency, it might feel actually like a logical, actually it's a healing mechanism from our body, And we have to also acknowledge that our bodies are wise. They do everything they need to survive and to be able to relax into the experience. The issue is when we are not able to come back. That is the issue, and that is where therapists, healers, psychologists, and in this case I'm adding it to psychedelic-assisted therapy. It can be of great help to support people making that transition back into that deep connection that we've sometimes lost. So at the spiritual level, loss of soul, there is a spiritual disconnection, it's a crisis of faith, At the end of the day, the connection that we have to the greater divine, we are little specks of, like a microorganism. What an atom is for us, we are an atom to the universe. And so we are part of something greater than us. And the moments of when we feel that connection are the moments of plenitude. These are the moments where we feel whole, we feel safe, we feel okay, regardless the circumstances around us. But when we lose that connection, it's like no matter what you have around you, there's something that is off. It's like a little atom going away from you. It's like suddenly it's not part of a big body, and it doesn't remember that it's in that connection. I also see in transgenerational trauma that people carry like stuck fragments of soul from their ancestors. As there are parts of ourselves, I'm not an expert in parts work, but I know that we have many parts inside of us. And sometimes those parts can be inherited. And it could be, for example, a fearful part, or a part that feels that was wronged, or a part that needs revenge. And those parts of our ancestors can get stuck on people. And that is one of the situations that I've seen. Also, I've seen courses in the ancestry line that need to be released, and interferences in the spiritual realm. When we have that experience of opening, sometimes there are energies, if we could call it, in a deeper dimension of our being that would be able to take control of certain parts of us. I mean, speaking from a parts work perspective, is that when we are not able to, for example, take care of ourselves in that moment, there is a part from our unconscious that takes that role. And the problem is that in that moment it's very helpful, we can survive, we can actually improve and get better. The problem is when it's been many years and we are still living like if we were frozen in time. We also see it as it starts in spirit, then it goes into our energetic body. The energetic body, I see it as an electromagnetic field that we carry inside of us and outside of us. This can be measured. There are cameras that can actually take a photograph of them, and we have, I mean, we could say 3 circulation systems. There is a blood vessels, there is a lymphatic, and there is the energetic. The energetic system, circulation system, it's with chakras and also meridians. So there are ethereal parts of ourselves that gather a lot of this electromagnetic information and energy around us. And we can see blocks, we can see overloads of energy, and at the end of the day is disbalances that sooner or later will affect the next, as it cascades into the symptoms. I've seen also tears and leaks of energy in the energetic body. These need to also be healed. They need to be cured, and they need to be kind of like make you feel whole again. At the same time, I've seen other things like information that it shouldn't be there. Let's put it that way. Then we go down into the emotional. The emotional, we see trapped emotions, such as fear, terror, feeling unsafe in the world, frozen emotional states, feelings of shame and guilt, and sometimes, for example, as we say, like transgenerational trauma, we might not even know what happened to our great-grandparents, but we are carrying that kind of information in us. And we say, why am I feeling this way? And a lot of the times we link this transgenerational trauma, for example, to atrocities in the world, with the Holocaust or genocides or whatever, but sometimes even alcoholism, family dysfunction, violence, hunger, poverty. It literally transmits that stress that our ancestors happened. It is my belief that most of us carry some to some degree this. Sometimes it's something that we just we keep with our life as usual, but sometimes it could be something that it might make it difficult for ourselves to operate in the world. In the cognitive, we see post-traumatic stress disorder, dissociation, intrusive memories and flashbacks, foggy brain, insomnia, etc. There are aspects of our body that actually become affected when there is not the proper flow. There is not the way things should flow completely. Relational is a major part, which is we lose our ability to trust, as well difficulty with intimacy and the attachment from parents to children. This, I would say, is the core of the issue. We lose the capacity to interact in a healthy, in a balanced, in the way that we should all be able to enjoy relationships. And of course, in the physiological, we go into chronic stress. There is a flooding, consistent flooding of cortisol, adrenaline. As I said, if boom, there's something that makes a huge noise, we do this. It literally will affect our nervous system. We will see a lot of immune system dysregulations, autoimmune problems, or not enough immunity, infections, etc., as well as chronic inflammation. We see chronic fatigue and exhaustion, epigenetic changes. So, as I say, the tragedy of trauma, in my view, the most tragic effect of trauma is the profound disconnection it creates from the people we love, from the world around us, our spiritual compass, and ultimately from our own selves. And for me, that is the part that is the most tragic in this experience. The transmission of trauma transgenerationally, it starts with a survivor, somebody who has to go through a very difficult experience. Then the children, here it says emotional distance and conflicts within the family. It starts creating a difficulty for the person who it's incapable to give that nourishment to the children. It's incapable to give that connection, that attachment. And then of course, then it goes to even grandchildren where there are deep imbalances in the family system, feelings of shame and guilt, etc. So it's important for us to always take into account that if we are working with something related to trauma, and this I speak as a therapist or as a healer, you have to always take into account that there might be something transgenerational, and that requires a certain level of honoring it and also acknowledging it and releasing it. Transgenerational trauma affects epigenetics. Epigenetics is, they have found that there are specific aspects in life, experiences, stress, toxicity, etc., that can literally change the information in which our DNA configurates kind of the building of our body. So they have seen that big T trauma has the capacity, for example, to switch off certain genes that maybe kept us away from certain chronic illnesses, maybe switches off certain genes that, I don't know, it literally is on a specific base for each person. They've done many studies. I literally didn't want to bring too much of the science. I just invite you to go to Google and say epigenetics and trauma, and you will find plenty of research. But for example, they've done, I put here a simple one where they have mice and they condition them to, I think it's a smell or a fear, and then the generations after, they will be conditioned like that. We don't understand how our unconscious works, and we don't understand the level of interconnectedness we have, especially with our family, with our ancestors. And I believe that the healing, it comes with that reconnection, with that healing again. Yeah, experiences of trauma and stress can lead to changes in the expression of genes related to stress, response and inflammation. Yeah. So let me start with what is psychedelic therapy, psychedelic-assisted therapy. This is a therapeutic approach that is assisted or is enhanced by the use of psychedelics. There has always been a type of psychedelic-assisted therapy for thousands of years. If you, for example, go to the Amazon forest, they use different plants to help heal these deep illnesses. They literally heal so many things, especially when we carry these illnesses. I remember, for example, the case of a person. He was a Venezuelan guy, and he had been mocked, and they did, he thought he was going to die, really. And after that, he couldn't leave his house. He was so traumatized, the poor guy, that he literally couldn't work. He couldn't leave his house after it. So what he ended up doing was selling everything, and he moved to Miami, to the US. But he was still feeling unsafe, and he was still frozen in that very difficult moment for him. So what happens is that he went to Peru. He went to one of these, a very good shaman, and what they do is to help bring the spirit back into the body, help them to recover that part that kind of got stuck in that fear. And as they bear them, and the person literally, he had to go through the fear, but he was able to come back to his center. Of course, this is an experience of difficult experiences, of a sudden accident or an act of difficult violence or whatever. Of course, it becomes more difficult when it's a chronic condition. So psychedelics really help us to reach deeper levels of the psyche. it's not just the parts that we can reach through talk therapy, for example. Psychology, psychotherapists, they need to rely with, it's not that they need to, but they can rely with something that takes us deeper. Breath work, mindfulness, hypnosis, and the work with parts also can help us achieve those parts. And I would even say, I'm not an expert, but family systems, when done under the right guidance, can also help us release a lot of things. So I wrote just a few ways in which psychedelic-assisted therapy can help to treating transgenerational trauma. There are many other ways, but I will just keep it simple now. One is it helps you to access deeply ingrained emotions, related to ancestral trauma. It helps you to uncover the roots. This type of therapy gives you a wider vision, gives you like an eagle-eye view of your life, of your experience, of your condition. You can diagnose many things. So when you see a bigger picture, it's easier to understand what is at the core, what is at the bottom. It also improves the default mode network, which is a network of interconnected brain regions that become active when the mind is at rest and not focused on external tasks. It is associated with self-referential thinking, daydreaming, recalling memories, and imagining the future. The default mode network is like the automatic way in which our mind takes off or does its thing. Usually when somebody is suffering from a type of anxiety or depression or trauma, it will ruminate. It will keep stuck on a thought or a fear or something that is not helping them, let's put it that way. So what some psychedelics can do is disrupt that automatic form of the brain, and in that disruption then it is possible to bring new ways, let's put it that way. The fluidity in the brain, it changes. It makes it more flexible. So for example, if in your brain you have very solidified channels of information between the different parts of your brain, with psychedelics, what they've seen is that it literally makes it more malleable. It makes it more like softer, so that in that way, whatever was keeping you in that frozen space, it can now relax, and then with the help of therapy, you will be able to make improvements and better changes there. Also, what they found in research is the experience of a profound sense of interconnectedness with everything. And with that comes empathy and compassion. And with empathy and compassion comes also the willingness to forgive, the willingness to let go. It opens parts of our heart that sometimes in the day-to-day beta state of mind, we don't access easily. But when we go into these deep alpha or even theta spaces of healing, we are able to see things from a greater perspective and from a more centered. It's not like a magic bullet, I would say, but it creates a great opportunity for healing. It helps us embrace our identity with greater pride, as well as cultivate forgiveness for what may have happened to our ancestors. At the end of the day, to forgive is to release and let go anything that doesn't serve your highest good. It also helps people to develop greater resilience and coping skills to operate in the world. I added a few transpersonal perspectives on the work on trauma. And first of all is the multidimensional part of it. The spiritual part needs to be addressed when working with trauma. It needs to be addressed, and the work in the right set and setting. And I would like to emphasize the importance of the therapy part. I don't believe psychedelics by their own, by their own, have the capacity to heal. You know, I mean, it could happen for sure, but otherwise you would see the users, you know, heavy drug users, they would be healed. You know, everybody would be. You go to a rave, everybody will be enlightened. You know what I'm saying? It's lacking the therapeutic, you know, and it is the therapy enhanced by this deepening of experience, which is what heals. And I think that it adds a spiritual component to the therapy that can happen. Psychedelics can facilitate profound healing by helping us reconnect to our divine or higher self. And that connection, for me, and this is a very, very personal opinion, for me it's the core of healing. This connection goes beyond any religion. Of course, if somebody has a religion, it becomes easier. But if somebody doesn't have it, it's reconnecting to our higher self and reconnecting to that mystery around us. And it's more than a belief or more than a philosophical understanding. It's an experiential one. And is, I think, related to what a baby in the arms of a mother feels in that deep connection and feeling deeply centered, equanimous and calm and connected. And some research have shown, I mean, these are for depression. The research that they show is that they correlated the long-term good changes. They correlated them to mystical experiences. So I think that spirituality, that part holds a great secret in the healing of all. I mean, that connection to the divine holds a great secret in all spiritual illnesses. And in this case, we're talking about transgenerational trauma. And I would like to give just a personal note of the treatments that I have done with the healing that I offer, the therapies that I offer. And one is getting stuck in the pain does not help anybody. It is easier said than done, you know. Not everybody has the capacity to do it right away, but ultimately that is one of the steps for healing. And sometimes what happens is that once we connect with this pain and once we go through the grief and once we go through the experience, we are able to then let it go. And with that find liberation. I had a client, a person who came. I had an online session with her in which I do something called releasing. And this person was a Jewish lady, and she was probably like 70 years old. And we found a lot of pain that she was carrying, but very overwhelming, you know. And then I told her, why don't we let it go? And she told me, Carlos, but if I don't hold it for my ancestors, who will? And she was Jewish. She was holding it for her ancestors that suffered so much in World War II. And I told her, but why not let it go for them too as well? You know? And it's like if a bulb light up for both of us, and as we released it for her and for all of them, I mean, you saw a shift in her personality. She was carrying literally the world. And in my beliefs, from my belief, it was not up to her to carry, you know. But nevertheless, we do. And we do it because of loyalty, because of love, because of, you know, we are good parts of our system. We are trying to help our system. But then my personal note is, what if we actually release it? You know? Wouldn't that be a little bit more helpful for the system? And I saw a great shift and a very amazing situation. And when I was doing my research for my thesis, I came across a book that is this thick. It's called The International Handbook of Legacies of Transgenerational Trauma. I think it's cases from everywhere in the world where great atrocities or great difficult things happen. And for me, I mean, doing research for trauma for a year, it was actually very tough, because you have to dive into that world and make sense of many things and read many accounts. But there was one chapter of that book that shifted my whole perspective, and it was about the Baha'i faith. So all the other chapters were about like Chilean, Argentinian, World War II, Cambodian, etc. Everywhere in the world, we all carry some level of problems. In Americas, we had huge colonization, etc., a genocide. But there was one chapter about the Baha'i faith, and during the Iranian Revolution, they were forced to either convert to Islam or be executed, and they had their connection so clear and so strong that they decided to go to jail and then be executed. And there are accounts, and they studied or they checked the descendants, and they were all doing fine in comparison to other places in the world. And what they say is that, first of all, the people in the Baha'i faith, they say that they went singing to the shooting range. They went singing there. They praise their God. Praise the divine, and they accepted their destiny as part of their journey. And the family members, many of them reported that at that same time, which later they came to know that that's what had happened, they literally felt a release. So there was an actual release at that time. So there were elements of forgiveness, there were elements of finding meaning, there were elements of faith, and there were elements of letting it go, of just let put it to rest, and let divine justice take over. So for me, that created the shift. That gave me the key to what is to heal transgenerational trauma. How do we meet it? How do we help help it to express itself, to flow and find its own way, and then release it? So for me, that is the part that I find the most helpful. As I say, getting stuck in the pain will not help anybody. We have to always focus in what are the steps that we have to take for us to be able to fully release for our ancestors, for us, and also for our children. And you can go to the next one. And so just as a final note, I just want to say that working in this realm is a very sacred, very serious. You can only go very slow, with full respect, honoring each person, and helping them release anything that is stuck and that it doesn't allow them to find that deep connection with themselves. So we're going to go now into questions and answers, and thank you very much, everybody.